Hello, Hacks and Hobbies listeners. Are you looking to share your opinions, give me feedback, or tell me what you're thinking? Send me a voice message. Voice messages are an easy way for you to send me audio that might end up in future episodes of Hacks and Hobbies. They're the latest feature from Anchor, the platform I use to make this podcast. Here are some of the things I would love to hear from you. Are you enjoying the direction the podcast has taken for season 2? Is there someone I can interview that will absolutely help you gain more knowledge? What do you think of the different topics that I talk about on the podcast with my guests? You can send me a voice message right now from wherever you're listening. Just tap the link in my show notes. I can't wait to hear from you. Thank you for tuning in to Hacks and Hobbies with your host, Junaid. In season 2 of Hacks and Hobbies, we're visited by our amazing guests coming from all walks of life who want to learn their story, their struggles, and their journey on how they got to where they are today. So stick around. In this episode, we get to speak with Antoine Airoldi. He's a storytelling coach, a speaker, trainer, and author. He's helped tons of personal brands get more authority by transcribing their ideas for their written content. Antoine, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So, let's talk about how you got to where you are today. What intrigued you or what inspired you to become a speaker, trainer, and an author?
Yeah, for sure. So basically, I did a bachelor's in English, and
Mm-hmm.
that's when I decided that I wanted to learn, when I was still in university, I wanted to learn how I could become an author. And I know
Mm-hmm.
it's not typical for every student to ask that question, but
Yeah.
I was reading a lot of books through school and outside of school. So I was reading like Seth Godin, Gary Vee, outside of the classroom. And I wanted to know, okay, I want to become an author. I want to be on the bookshelf. What can I do?
Yeah.
That was the first question
Yeah.
I asked myself.
Mm. That is pretty on point. I mean, did you have anybody inspire you to become an author? I mean, it's great that you had your mind made up before going to college that you wanted to be an author. But like, what story in your life, in your background, inspired you to actually get there or become an author?
Yeah, so basically my mind wasn't made up before university, but it was really during university where I was reading all these books and kept asking myself, if these people can be authors, what can I do to become an author, right? And there wasn't a story in
Mm-hmm.
particular, but it was more about Seth Godin's The Icarus Deception. So it's a book where
Mm-hmm.
he talks about art should be our primary focus in this life and that it
Mm-hmm.
helps the
Mm-hmm.
economy. And so I thought to myself, the art that I like to produce is written. So I like to write. And
Mm.
basically, with that book and the Ask Gary Vee book, I was just going through them and I stopped reading them halfway through. And I said, okay, I need to write a book.
Yeah.
And I didn't really know
Yeah.
the steps, but I just started
Mm-hmm.
writing. And that's really how I started becoming an author.
Nice. No, no, that's really intriguing because I've know of Seth Godin and I've read few of his books. Actually, no, I haven't read any of his books, but I've listened to a lot of his podcasts and his seen some of his videos, some of his talks. He's given some really amazing talks on the creator space and in the because he essentially himself is a creator and an author, and he is in it to help everybody get to where they want to get to. Maybe I'm wrong, but I know that he used to be a marketer, or he still is a marketer, and his latest book, This is Marketing, is pretty amazing. But being inspired by Seth Godin and Gary Vee, that's totally, yeah, that totally makes sense to get into this author, being in this space of writing books and creating content and creating art through writing. All right. So next up, what are some of the things that you're currently working on that have you super excited, and how is it going to help? Before we get into it, tell me about some of the books that you've written, and what's the content?
Yeah, for sure. So, my first book that I've written is a nonfiction book. It's called
Mm-hmm.
Insights from Professionals, and it's a
Mm-hmm.
series of interviews with business owners and copywriters, artists.
Mm-hmm.
So, all these different professions that we're not used to, let's say, not
Mm-hmm.
used to in the sense where you can't really go to school for them and then land a job, I guess, for it. So, basically, I
Mm-hmm.
actually interviewed people with abnormal careers, we could say. And
Mm-hmm.
basically, it's just to learn more about their world and what they did to get there. It's really how you
Yeah.
can learn more about success. How does one become successful in different fields?
Mm. So in the book, are the stories very similar on how these people found success? Is there a pattern that you can detect?
I would say there's not an exact pattern, but I would say that
Mm-hmm.
consistency was one of them, which they were
Mm-hmm.
consistent with what they were doing. So that's how they were
Yeah.
able to break through.
Nice. Yeah, consistency is one of the big things that every successful person that I've heard from has talked about. There's a new person that I discovered recently, Nathan Lacta, and he's written an amazing article on how to essentially get massive following on your podcast. And he said all you need to do is be consistent. Instead of posting 5 episodes per week, post 7 episodes per week. And if you can, post as many episodes as you can on a daily basis. You can do multiple episodes in a day, or you can do spread them out. It all comes down to how much content you can create. And one person that followed that advice to the T is Tyler Wagner. He started his podcast about 10 months ago. And I've been following his journey, and I've been following him, and he was on the podcast. We got to talk to him on the podcast here as well. He's amassed 1,000 interviews with 1,000 people in 10 months. And I was like, holy smokes, how are you able to do that? And he's like, well, the first 200 episodes was not a lot of fun because he was still figuring a lot of things out. The first few episodes, I don't know if it was first 200, but he said, it was a lot of work. And he's like, he finally figured out his system and he systemized it where he could then go in and be like, all right, this is the process of how I'm going to record and how I'm going to set it up. And it was really neat. He's got the system that he's got down, and being able to do 1,000 podcast episodes is just monumental. And through this, I mean, he was able to also get some big names like Gary Vee on his podcast as well. Just all he had to do was ask one specific person who said, what's one thing that I could do to help you? And he was like, I just want to be able to talk to Gary Vee in the same person. And she made it possible somehow. The gods made it happen. All right, so that's pretty cool. Now, where can somebody find the book that you've written, and what are some of your future plans and some other material that you might be working on?
Yeah, for sure. So people can get it on Amazon. So they can just go on Amazon and look for it, and it's going to be there. And for
Mm-hmm.
future works, I'm actually going to be in a co-authored book called Magnetic Entrepreneur. That's a
Nice.
book by Robert J. Moore, and he's an
Mm-hmm.
international best-selling author. So he's going to be releasing that book very soon. He's doing a series of different books, so the same title, but with
Mm-hmm.
different people in the book. So he's basically sharing
Yeah.
different stories within his book so that
Mm-hmm.
more people can learn more about how they became entrepreneurs and how they got to where they are and just more about their story,
Yeah.
really.
Nice. Very
Yeah,
nice. I will take a look at the book that you sent and that you already have published. We'll post a link to it in the episode notes. What are you aiming to get out of being an author? And I know some of these questions might not be hard, they're quite easily. I'm just trying to see If you could tell us an awesome story that you have to the
Yeah,
audience.
for sure. So for me, writing is something that I love to do. It makes me more creative. So just
Mm-hmm.
writing down anything, basically. If it's not a book, it's just writing, writing my goals, writing what I want to accomplish in the day, right? Just writing
Mm-hmm.
down anything. It's just, for me, it's just a creative habit that I have and I like to do it. So, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, that's really why I write.
All right. So I one question that we asked before you get on the podcast is, what is one hobby that you wish you got into?
Yeah,
And
yeah, for sure. So for
mm-hmm.
me, I would say it's sports, more
Mm-hmm.
like team sports. I wasn't much of a
Mm-hmm.
sports guy when I was younger, and so I mean, I don't practice any sports other than just go to the gym or things like that. Like sports, you can
Yeah.
train alone. So that's really what I'm
Mm-hmm.
more used to.
Okay. So what are some of these sports that you wish you got into? Like, I know you mentioned team sports. Was it basketball or football or hockey?
Yeah, there's none in
Mm-hmm.
particular. It's just maybe more about doing more, I guess, team
Mm-hmm.
sports. I guess I didn't really have one in
Yeah.
particular. I like playing
Mm-hmm.
basketball.
Okay.
It's pretty cool.
So one thing that I've noticed in myself as well, I didn't really. I mean, I played some team sports growing up with my classmates, but I was never the best. I was always, either a goalie or either a defense for in basketball, or either fielding while we were playing cricket. And I never really stepped it up, and like, oh, this is absolutely what I want to do. It's because I just didn't have the passion for it. And I think it mostly comes from watching my dad work super hard, and he was into technology more or less. And so the one thing that I did love to do was biking, cycling. And throughout my younger age, I always had a bicycle where I could ride to wherever I wanted to get to. And what's funny is every single bicycle that I had a BMX once, I had a banana bike once, I had a mountain bike. Every single bike ended up getting stolen because kids just like to steal stuff. And this is mainly my fault because I would be running an errand. I would park the bike outside the store because I was living in Saudi Arabia. And I come out and the bike is gone because I didn't have a concept of putting a lock on it, right? So that was pretty funny. Do you have any interesting, funny stories like this that
Uh,
we can share?
Not necessarily. I don't really have any funny story like that. I mean, I had a bike too, but I mean, it wasn't ever stolen or
I
anything.
mean, not, it doesn't have to be bike related. It could be anything at all. I mean, what were your parents like? What did they do? And was being an author inspired? Well, you said your main inspiration was Seth Godin, but was it somewhere in your childhood that you were reading a lot of books, or was it very brand new?
Yeah, for books, it was really brand new. Like I wasn't
Mm-hmm.
really reading anything before
Mm-hmm.
university. I haven't like the first time I bought a book was for one of my classes, and I thought they were crazy that I was gonna have to buy a book and stuff. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I had to get used to the culture of it basically. So,
Mm-hmm.
my parents are entrepreneurs, so they
Okay.
they don't read that much. They do more. They work more than read. So
Mm-hmm.
it's brand new to my culture that basically reading wasn't really something that I wanted to do that much, and now it's something
Mm-hmm.
that it's more on my day-to-day basis where I love to read. So I mean, just something that happened, and
No, reading is amazing because you learn so much from the authors. Because that's the one thing amazing about books is that you can be transported to a totally different space and knowledge space, especially when you're reading fictional novels. But when you're reading nonfiction, you get to learn the stories of and the struggles that people went through into getting to where they are now, and how it got them to the point that they're in. Recently, Errol Erdman mentioned that he's going to be bringing on Brock Thomas to his podcast to do a live conversation with him. And I learned about Brock Thomas maybe a few months ago, and I was totally blown away. I was like, wow, this guy has an amazing, amazing story. And I've spoken with Robert J. Moore too, and he's got an amazing story too. He's telling me how he was just down on his luck and he was just crazy. And he had to build himself up. And if you listen to one of the stories behind the author of Harry Potter, how she was homeless and she used to hang out in libraries and she started reading all these books. And then the other reason I asked about books is because, you're an author and I am hoping to become an author. One thing that I noticed with my son, my 8-year old, he loves to read books. He's going to be 9 years old by the time this episode publishes. So apologies on that. I've I've got some uh, backlogs, and an earlier podcast we were talking to, and my friend was just making fun of me. He's like, who knows when this podcast will see the light of day, because it's going to be the post dystopian, because flying cars are the future now and Facebook doesn't exist anymore. It was just really out there. It's quite funny. But Robert J. Moore and all of these amazing folks have some crazy, awesome stories. And so, what I was mentioning is, my son, he loves to read books, and currently he's reading almost all the books that he can on the Diary of a Wimpy Kid. And I think before that, he was all over. I think last year he was all over Captain Underpants. And I'm like, what is this Captain Underpants? I mean, talking about underpants and talking about undergarments, it's something like taboo when I was growing up. We don't talk about these things. But now there's this kid's book called all about underpants and how this is Captain Underpants, and he's got these superpowers. So I was like, oh my God, this is crazy. But I'm trying to let him discover new things on his own. And he absolutely loves reading. He loves to tell stories as well. And I love the different questions that he asks. So tell me, what is your goal for 2019? Are you planning on picking up a hobby, or are you just going to focus on the passion that you have for writing books?
Yeah, so I'm mostly going to focus on my passion for books because
Mm-hmm.
I also coach authors. So I also coach
Okay.
writers to become authors. So
Mm-hmm.
coaches, speakers, and influencers, entrepreneurs to basically go from an idea to publish their
Mm-hmm.
book. So really,
Yeah.
I help. That's what I really do. I help those who want to get their book out in 90 days, so that in 90
Nice.
days they can become a published author.
Wow. Can you share some of those tips with my audience?
Yeah, for sure. So basically, when we start, there's different process we can go through. There's an automated program where they can get the information themselves. I have
Mm-hmm.
I have an ebook that's currently out. I'm transforming
Mm-hmm.
the ebook into a workbook to get it out to print as well. But
Okay.
what I do one-on-one is really go through the idea process where we have to figure out an idea together and then decide on the title, the subtitle, and
Mm-hmm.
start writing, and then scheduling a writing schedule.
Okay. And so how would somebody go about setting up a writing schedule? Is that something that they remind themselves, or have an app remind them, or what's your process?
My process is really dividing the word count
Mm-hmm.
into the 90 days.
Okay.
So basically, whatever word count you want to attain,
Mm-hmm.
you divide that by 90 days. So
Okay.
you know how many words you need to write every single day.
Mm-hmm.
So then you can keep yourself accountable on Google Docs.
Mm-hmm.
You can have an option where you can check your word count of the day.
Yeah.
And then if ever you don't attain it or you exceed it,
Mm-hmm.
you can say how many words you exceeded by or missing
Mm-hmm.
from the previous day.
Okay. Now, some of the things that I've encountered when I was writing my chapter for The Magnetic Entrepreneur is that I didn't start really writing it. I started speaking it, because I do not have the amount of time that I could put down to just sit down and be writing, because of my other, what do you call that, responsibilities. So I have a 2 hour commute daily, and I would spend each of the hours to work on the part of the books that I want to write. And I've noticed that a lot of the times, either I'm repeating words or repeating concepts, and then sometimes the story is a tangent. So how do you account for that when you're editing something? So I understand that if you have a writing schedule, you're actually writing and be able to go back and look at, okay, what did I write about yesterday? Where does the story continue? Do you do a writing schedule, or do you also start with an outline, or do you out to an outline?
Yeah, so I rarely do an outline just because I like to write from the inspiration that comes to me.
Okay.
That I find a outline just restricts me of too many things. So if I
Mm-hmm.
ever I want to write something else or I want to change
Mm-hmm.
ideas, then I'm
Mm-hmm.
open to it.
Okay.
So I basically just
Um.
set up a writing schedule and then go from there. And if ever let's say I write for 30 or 60 minutes, then I
Mhm.
stop, then I'm just gonna write maybe like one last sentence and say like continue writing about this or something.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That's pretty interesting way to look at it. So I took some writing courses through masterclass.com. One of them was with Malcolm Gladwell, and the second one is with James Patterson, the New York Times bestseller. I mean, every single novel that he puts out
Hmm.
is a bestseller. And both of them mentioned that, you should have some kind of an outline. It doesn't have to be in stone, but an outline where you talk about the different concepts, because what you're mentioning with writing 60 minutes or 90 minutes a day. I don't know if you mentioned 90 minutes. I think you said 30 to
Yeah,
60.
30. It's, yeah.
30 to 60, right? So I think what that sounds like is a lot of free writing. Is that right?
It's not free writing. So really the
Okay.
difference between free writing and writing for a book is that free writing
Mm-hmm.
doesn't always make sense.
Okay.
When I'm doing my writing for 30 to 60 minutes per day,
Mm-hmm.
so if I'm writing a book, say,
Mm-hmm.
well, I mean, all the content is relevant to the book. Yeah.
Okay. So you figure out what book title is going to be, or what concepts you're going to be talking about in this book,
Yep.
right? Okay. Then you have an anchor point to say, okay, this is the flow of my story, and then you can add and subtract stories as you go along.
Yeah, for sure. Like basically what you do
Okay.
is for the title, you keep it broad.
Hmm.
So really
Keep a
yeah,
broad title.
this is
Okay.
for nonfiction. So you keep it broad, and
Yeah.
then for the subtitle,
Hmm.
you keep it very niche.
Okay. That makes sense. So you have a broad title to bring in everybody, and then when they see the subtitle, like, oh, it's not for me, or it is for me.
Exactly, because the subtitle is really like what problem you're solving throughout the book.
Mm-hmm. That is a really good point, because I never really thought about that when I was doing my chapter. And you gave me some really good points, like put the name in the beginning of the title of the chapter. Now I'm not sure when the book's going to go out. I've been talking back and forth with Robert as he's helping with the putting the book together and getting it out. I think the editors are going through all the materials. So I got to go check with him and see how that's coming along. Really good points, man. I really appreciate it. Is there something you want to share with the audience that we might not know? I mean, we are a hacks and hobbies podcast talking about hacks and hobbies, which essentially covers all of life.
Nice. Yeah, so basically, I'm also working on a book where it's the chapters are co-authored. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm having celebrities, influencers, I'm having entrepreneurs in there. So I'm really having the most successful stories and strategies because it's a strategy book that I'm creating, so that I'm getting
Mm-hmm.
like a step-by-step process of what success means to certain people. So
Yeah.
it's a little more like my previous book, but this time around it's less focused on
Mm-hmm.
interviews, but more focused on the story. So the person themselves, they write
Nice.
the chapter and they really explain to them
Yeah.
like what they do and how they help people and basically just give them more insights about what success means to them and how they got success in their life. It's like I have
Nice.
multimillionaires in there. Um, I have
Wow.
Greg S. Reed that wrote an endorsement for the book. He's a New York Times bestselling
Mm-hmm.
author, and just having a lot of
Nice.
powerful people in there to share their message.
That's very awesome. Now, how can people reach you, and where can they find you?
Yeah, for sure. So they can find me on Facebook. They can find me on Instagram. So on Instagram, it's Antoine
Mm-hmm.
underscore Airoldi. And on Facebook, it's just you can
Okay.
contact my personal page. Unfortunately I'm at 5,000
Mm-hmm.
friends, so I can only do it through messages
Yeah,
now.
of course.
So people can
Mm-hmm.
contact me through there. I still see it. So yeah.
Okay, perfect. I'll include the links to the book as well as the different places people can reach you. Do you have a specific website that people can go to as well and learn about if they wanted to bring you on for their services?
Yeah, for sure. They can either go on how to write a book in 90days.com or
Uh,
AntoineAiroldi.com.
all right, perfect. This was awesome, man. Thank you so much for your excellent tips. And we definitely look forward to speaking with you in the future. And we'll make sure people can check out the books that you've written and any future projects that are coming down.
Awesome. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you for listening to Hacks and Hobbies. You can find additional information on the guest today on the website hacksandhobbies.com. Please feel free to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss out on upcoming interviews with amazing guests.